Approximately 500 years ago, an English ship dropped anchor off the Massachusetts coast, carrying around 100 individuals. They established a settlement called Plymouth near the shore, neighboring the Pocanacut Native American tribe. One day, a representative from Pocananctus greeted the English with a simple hello. This raises the question, how did Pocananctus acquire proficiency in English? Furthermore, what concealed truths do Americans aim to shield from their progeny? What pivotal events precipitated the onset of the American War of Independence? All of this we elucidate. The second British colony in America, Plymouth, succeeded the initial settlement along the Massachusetts coast, positioned approximately 700 kilometers from Jamestown. Its nomenclature stemmed from the British port, Plymouth, from which its pioneers embarked. Predominantly, the colony's first settlers belonged to a specific Christian sect, later known as Pilgrims, signifying devotees on a sacred expedition. Deprived of religious liberty in Britain, these pilgrims departed from the British port Plymouth in 1620 aboard the Mayflower, traversing the sea route to America. After a 65-day odyssey, they reached the Massachusetts coast in December 1622, bringing women and children among the Mayflower's passengers. During their settlement, the colonists forged an agreement. This pact dictated that the colony would legislate independently but maintain allegiance to the British Crown and adhere to their distinct Christian sect. The colony's inception marked a promising beginning for these settlers and their progeny. However, manifold tribulations beset them from the outset. Upon arrival, the harsh cold proved insurmountable, with the hastily constructed wooden huts failing to shield them from the biting wind. Additionally, the sandy terrain surrounding the colony rendered cultivation impractical, exacerbating the food shortage. Disease further plagued the settlement, claiming the lives of approximately half of its population. The survivors endured dire circumstances. Amidst these trials, a fortuitous turn of events transpired. The Plymouth colony shared its vicinity with the formidable Pocanacut tribe, later dubbed the Wampanoag by the British during their oppression. Witnessing the colony's distress, the Native Americans extended assistance. Semiset, the religious leader of the Pocahontas, was among those who approached the colony, having acquired knowledge of the English language from coastal English fishermen. Yet, prior to entering into battle, the British sought to learn an essential skill: how to cultivate crops in sandy soil. The Native Americans provided a simple yet effective solution: fertilizing the soil with fish manure. This practice involved burying fish in the sand and utilizing them as fertilizer for crop cultivation. Upon the advice of the Native Americans, the British began cultivating corn using fish manure. In a short span, lush cornfields surrounded the Plymouth colony, manifesting the long-awaited miracle. While jubilation ensued among the British, another task awaited them: fulfilling their promise to eliminate the enemies of Pocananctus. On the night of August 14, 1621, a contingent of Pocananctus warriors joined forces with the British in an assault on an enemy village. The British unleashed a hail of bullets on the village, resulting in the sudden demise of numerous sleeping Native Americans. The English and Pocanacuts returned to Plymouth victorious, marking the occasion with the celebration of their first harvest. The precise date of this celebration remains uncertain, occurring between September and November in 1621. The three-day festivities comprised various games and martial exercises, evolving into the commemoration now known as Thanksgiving, a gesture of gratitude by the British, thanking God for their prosperity. A mere 50 Britishers participated in the celebration against a larger number of Native Americans. King Massasoit attended with 90 of his people, bringing 5 hunted deer and wild fruits. The British hosts served a grand feast, including a large turkey and other foods. Regrettably, this celebration unfolded over the remains of the Native Americans they had killed, a somber juxtaposition of friendship and conflict with Pocananctus and the English. The aftermath of this brief period of peace exacted a heavy toll on Pocananctus and the other native inhabitants. Following the success of the Plymouth colony, waves of settlers arrived from England, expanding into the region now known as New England. As the British secured footholds in coastal areas, their agenda shifted towards the enslavement of the Native Americans. In 1636, a mere 15 years after the establishment of the Plymouth colony, the British launched an invasion against another formidable Native American tribe, the Pequots. Led by British commander John Mason, this offensive resulted in the destruction of a large Pequot village, trapping around 700 women, children, and elderly individuals in a devastating fire. Despite desperate pleas for help, no Englishman showed mercy. Commander Mason callously asserted that God, in his judgment against unbelievers, had turned the village into a burning furnace. The place was left strewn with the lifeless bodies of those deemed enemies of God. John Mason, in a chilling count of the bodies, declared it to be God's just judgment. Another British commander implicated in the massacre, Underhill, sought to rationalize the killing of women and children by referencing religious doctrines that occasionally advocate the demise of families as a whole. Numerous Englishmen subsequently justified and explained this incident. In his book, Magnalia Christi Americana, New England religious leader Cotton Mather, as quoted by the author of American Holocaust, David Stannard, described the incident, claiming that 500 to 600 barbarians vanished in an hour, relieving the world of what they perceived as a burden. These kinds of justifications and excuses have been historically employed by the British to rationalize their acts of cruelty, a trend that persists to this day. The war against the Pequot tribe, lasting about a year, culminated in the tribe's complete annihilation. Their villages were razed, and survivors either faced captivity, being bound with ropes and cast into the sea, or were sold into slavery. With the eradication of the Pequots, their name was expunged from the red-drawn map of New England. The Pequot River in Connecticut underwent a renaming to the Thames River, and the town of Pequot on its bank assumed the name New London, which endures to this day. The obliteration of the Pequot tribe marked just the beginning of a series of devastating events. Almost 38 years later, another major conflict shattered the last vestiges of hope for Native American independence. The support once extended by Massasoit, the king of the Pocahontas tribe, to the Plymouth colony during their inaugural Thanksgiving feast became a distant memory. Following Massasoit's demise in 1661, hostilities erupted between the people of the Plymouth colony and the sons of their erstwhile benefactor, despite the latter retaining British names. By 1675, a peculiar custom among Native Americans emerged, where individuals adopted names resembling those of the British. After Massasoit's death, his eldest son ascended to the throne, changing his name to Alexander. The British accused Alexander of conspiracy, leading to his arrest in 1662 and subsequent torture to death. Following Alexander's demise, his brother Metacom assumed leadership, adopting the name English Philip. Despite Philip's efforts to maintain peace with the English, their attitude had turned derogatory, with the English asserting authority over the Pocahontas. The Pocahontas, in turn, purchased arms from the British and ceded lands in return. However, in 1671, the British compelled Philip to sign an agreement requiring the Pocahontas to return the firearms acquired by relinquishing their lands. This arrangement left the Pocahontas bereft of weapons, land, and prestige, rendering them wholly at the mercy of the British. Philip found the present situation unbearable. Simultaneously, the British activities were on the rise. They engaged in the recruitment of Pocahontas for espionage, converting them to Christianity. In June 1675, the discovery of one such spy's body led to the Plymouth colony attributing the killing to Native Americans, resulting in the execution of 3 individuals. This event further fueled Philip's determination, prompting him to take a firm stand for a decisive battle against the English. The conflict between Philip and the English is known as King Philip's War, spanning from 1675 to 1676. It marked the final Native American War of Independence, with Philip and Pocahontas displaying courage in the face of necessity, a matter of life, death, and the fate of future generations. However, their position was precarious as the British possessed firearms, while Native Americans were left empty-handed due to prior agreements. Having only a few guns acquired from British sources, Dutch smugglers, and the French, the Native Americans were ill-equipped for the war. They resorted to archery in their last battle, facing a British advantage from the outset. Employing ruthless tactics, the British set fire to Native American villages, reducing inhabited settlements to ashes. The severity of British actions was exemplified by the words of English religious leader and author Cotton Mather, who likened the burning of villages to a barbecue. Some Native Americans sided with the British during the conflict, aiding in the suppression of Pocahontas resistance. Following their victory, the English sought to capture King Philip for retribution. Although Philip evaded capture, his 9-year-old son and wife fell into the hands of the English and were enslaved. Despite his efforts to elude capture, Philip met his demise in August 1676 when the British learned of his presence in his native village of Rhode Island. In the ensuing attack, Philip, the last hero of the Independence War, valiantly fought against bullets until his death. Ironically, the individual responsible for Philip's demise belonged to his own tribe but had converted to Christianity and aligned with the British. Instead of showing respect for the brave adversary's body, the British sought revenge. They dismembered the body before callously throwing the pieces into the fire. In his book, This Land of Their Lands, American writer David Silverman reveals that King Pumeticom's severed hands were given to his assassin, Alderman, who sold one hand and preserved the other for exhibition. Visitors paid to witness the macabre display of the Pumeticom king's severed hand. Philip's head was severed and transported to the Plymouth colony, where it was mounted on a spear outside the settlement. Over time, the flesh on Philip's face and head either decayed or was consumed by birds, leaving only the skull of the last native king of New England hanging on the spear for 25 years. In a grim celebration of Philip's death, the Plymouth and Massachusetts colonies declared August 13th as a day of Thanksgiving. Philip, whose father had served as an aide to the British and taught them agricultural practices, is now commemorated with a statue in Massachusetts, where he once ruled. This historical narrative, often omitted, reveals a dark aspect of Thanksgiving Day that modern Americans may not be fully aware of. Despite this, Thanksgiving Day has evolved into a cherished tradition in America, observed on the last Thursday of November since President Abraham Lincoln declared it a holiday in 1863. Post-King Philip's War, English dominance in New England was total, resulting in the displacement of Native Americans from their lands to confined areas. Meanwhile, European settlers continued to flock to the coastal regions of America, where they thrived in a hospitable environment. This influx of settlers contributed to a burgeoning population, with families averaging 8 children each. The Plymouth colony acted as a seed, giving rise to 13 English colonies along the American coast within a century. Additionally, the French occupied significant areas of America and Canada, while a Spanish colony existed where Florida is located today. As Europeans engaged in conflicts within Europe, similar disputes arose among Britain, Spain, and France over border issues in America. These skirmishes escalated into a significant war in 1756, during which Native Americans strategically supported various European states. The colonial militia, a force from the British colonies, fought on behalf of Britain, led by an officer named George Washington. The culmination of these European wars in America occurred in 1763, with the expulsion of France from Canada and the U.S. under the Paris Treaty. Britain assumed control of all French territories in Canada, while French territories in America were divided between Great Britain and Spain. The British occupation of Florida, previously under Spanish control, was also acknowledged. Some independent areas of Native Americas fell under British occupation, expanding British influence beyond the 13 colonies. Despite this zenith of British rule in America, the conclusion of the 7 Years' War marked the beginning of the end for British power in the region. Two critical mistakes were made by the British Empire. Firstly, to compensate for war losses, Britain imposed new taxes on the American colonies, including a heavy tax on tea imports, without granting parliamentary seats to the colonies. The second mistake involved prohibiting European settlers from entering territories acquired from France, reserving these areas exclusively for Native Americans, also known as Red Indians. This policy aimed to protect Native American lands by relocating European settlers near Indian reserves in the American colonies to other regions. These actions, imposing taxes and displacing Europeans for Native American settlements, stirred discontent among English residents in the American colonies, leading to the roots of rebellion. The spark of rebellion ignited in Boston, approximately 70 kilometers from the Plymouth colony. A pivotal moment in this resistance was captured in a painting published in an American newspaper, transforming the sparks of rebellion into the flames of freedom. This painting laid the foundation for a new nation, and the United States of America was born.